Imagine this. You're walking through a dense forest shrouded in twilight, the trees casting long, ominous shadows that stretch like fingers into the earth. You don't remember how you got here. The path behind you has vanished, swallowed by darkness and mist. Ahead, there is no clear way out, only more thickets and tangled roots. Somewhere distant, you think you hear the echo of a voice, perhaps your own, but it's fractured, broken, like a whisper caught in a storm. You want to call out to find help, but your throat is tight, clenched with a fear you cannot name. This is not just any forest. It is your inner wilderness, the labyrinth of emotional wounds you carry, the secret and silent places where pain festers unseen. You have been told that healing is about letting go, forgiving, or moving on. Simple, clear, like leaving a forest by following a sunlit path. But what if the very act of trying to escape blinds you to what hides in the shadows? What if healing is not about releasing pain, but rather about confronting something far darker and more unsettling within yourself, the parts you desperately want to bury? You might recoil at the thought because it contradicts everything you've been taught. You have been offered remedies like balm, distraction, or even denial, soothing prescriptions that promise peace without the price of discomfort. Yet the deeper truth Carl Jung unearthed, something so profound it can shake the foundation of your understanding of healing, is that the wounds you seek to heal are themselves gateways to a darker self. This self is not evil in some simplistic moral sense, but a force lurking beneath your conscious awareness, a shadow that thrives on avoidance and masks itself as pain, fear, and shame. Consider this. What if the more you try to heal without acknowledging that shadow, the more it tightens its grip? What if the conventional wisdom of healing is a false promise, a tantalizing mirage that sends you running deep into the forest, farther from wholeness with every step? Imagine the terror and exhilaration of realizing that the very wounds you cannot face may be the keys to your liberation, but only if you surrender to their darkness rather than flee it. There is an urgent and uncomfortable paradox here. We seek healing to become whole, yet the path to wholeness demands that you embrace what you are conditioned to reject. This is not a gentle invitation. It is a summons from the depths of your psyche, a call to wrestle with pain so primal that your mind rebels against the idea. Do you dare face the parts of yourself that have been branded unworthy, broken, or monstrous? Can you look into the abyss without turning away, knowing that the abyss is also staring back? Why is it that our emotional wounds, those raw, pulsating places inside, refuse to simply fade away with time or through positive thinking? Why does the shadow behind them persist, reshaping itself into fears, compulsions, or illusions that keep resurfacing like ghosts in a haunted house? The answer is not found in superficial remedies, but in a profound psychological process Jung described as the confrontation with the unconscious. It's a journey not just of healing, but of transformation, a crucible where the very essence of your identity is tested and remade. But what does it mean to confront the unconscious, to engage with the shadow? How do you begin to navigate a realm where familiar rules collapse and where the self you thought you knew dissolves into ambiguity? This is the core of Jung's darkest truth about healing emotional wounds. Healing is not about fixing what is broken. It is about descending into your own inner darkness, recognizing and integrating the parts of yourself you have feared or denied. At first, this sounds terrifying, because it is. It means you must unlearn everything you have believed about safety and control in emotional suffering. It means facing confusion, chaos, and even despair. And yet, paradoxically, this descent is what makes genuine healing possible. To touch the shadow is to invite wholeness, but only after surrendering the illusions of separation and perfection. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that the enemy you have been fighting is not outside you, but within. Imagine the exhaustion of a lifelong battle to keep these wounds hidden and the stark relief that comes with acknowledging them. But beyond relief lies a challenge. The path forward is uncertain, fraught with the potential for further pain, but also the possibility of profound growth. Jung's insight warns that the pain of avoiding the shadow is far greater than the pain of facing it, but it does not lessen the fear this truth ignites. You may wonder, how can one even begin such a journey without being consumed by the darkness? What tools exist to guide you through the forest when the light seems to fail? And what happens if the shadow resists integration, if instead it overwhelms and fractures the fragile self you are trying to save? These questions do not yield easy answers because the process Jung describes is inherently personal, chaotic, and mysterious. It demands patience and courage, qualities often eclipsed by our culture's obsession with quick fixes and surface-level positivity. It asks you not to chase after healing as a destination, but to become a pilgrim in your own psyche, willing to meet your shadows face to face. So, what is the nature of this shadow that lurks behind your emotional wounds? How does it manifest in your daily life, shaping your fears, desires, and choices? Is it possible that every attempt to heal, without acknowledging this shadow, only deepens your entanglement in the very patterns you despise? And what does Jung mean when he declares that healing is not possible without death of the old self, a symbolic death that is as frightening as it is necessary? These are not rhetorical curiosities, but existential urgencies. Beneath every emotional ache lies a story your conscious mind has refused to tell, a story encoded in myths, dreams, and symbols. To heal is to become a storyteller, a witness to your own hidden depths, embracing the paradox that the darkest truths hold the potential for the brightest transformations. Before you step further into this journey, prepare yourself to question everything you thought you knew about emotional healing. Prepare to encounter a truth that may unsettle your identity and your beliefs about suffering. This is not a comfort zone. It is a place of radical self-confrontation that, whether welcomed or feared, demands your full presence. The forest is waiting. The shadow watches. The path forward is obscured but real. To walk it is to face Carl Jung's darkest truth about healing emotional wounds, and in doing so, perhaps, find yourself more deeply than ever before. Imagine, for a moment, that the very fabric of your identity is woven not from light, but from threads of shadow, those parts of yourself you have never dared to name aloud, let alone face. Why is this darkness so deeply embedded within you that it refuses to be exorcised by mere will or hope? Why does the pursuit of healing often feel like chasing smoke rather than grasping solid ground? The answer lies at the intersection of psychology, philosophy, and the societal narratives that have shaped your understanding of what it means to suffer, to heal, and ultimately to be human. Carl Jung would argue that this hidden force, the shadow, is not an aberration or flaw but a fundamental dimension of psychic life. It is the reservoir of everything unconscious within you, repressed fears, unacceptable desires, primitive instincts, and unresolved traumas. Yet the shadow is more than a psychological container of pain. It is the other you have banished from your awareness, the secret twin that grows stronger in your absence. To ignore it is to feed it. To pretend it does not exist is to live under a spell of illusion. Jung famously said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This darkness, then, is not a void to be feared, but a minefield to be mapped with brutal honesty. But why is this shadow so ferocious, so unyielding? Friedrich Nietzsche offers a piercing insight. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. The abyss is your shadow, your unacknowledged wounds, the sum of your disowned self. Nietzsche's warning is not about some external evil, but about the internal consequences of denial and repression. The deeper you push your pain away, the more it shapes you, often in ways you fail to recognize, manifesting as bitterness, compulsions, or emotional paralysis. This internal monster is quiet, subtle, and insidious, influencing your reactions, your relationships, and the narratives you tell yourself about your life. Arthur Schopenhauer, with his grim but honest philosophy, located suffering as an inescapable core of existence. Pain and suffering are always unavoidable for a large intelligence and a deep heart, he wrote, acknowledging that the human condition is inescapably tethered to wounds. But rather than fleeing from this reality, Schopenhauer suggested that the confrontation with suffering, when not veiled by illusions, could stir liberation. The problem is that our culture trains us to reject suffering, to sanitize it with distractions and platitudes, rather than to embrace its transformative potential. This reflects what Aldous Huxley described as the dark night of the soul, a profound inner crisis that strips away comforting illusions and forces a painful reckoning with the raw, unvarnished self. Jean-Paul Sartre's existential philosophy deepens this understanding. He posited that human freedom is both a gift and a curse because it demands that you own your choices and your being, even the shadow parts you would rather disown. The emotional wounds you carry are not merely accidents of fate. They are entangled in the choices you have made, the meaning you have assigned to events, and the self you have constructed. Sartre's insistence that existence precedes essence means that you are not born with a fixed identity but are constantly making yourself through your actions, including how you relate to your wounds. Denial of the shadow, then, is a refusal to assume the radical responsibility of becoming whole. Viktor Frankl's harrowing experiences in Nazi concentration camps brought this truth into stark relief. In the depths of unimaginable suffering, he discovered that meaning, not comfort or avoidance, was the decisive factor in survival and healing. Frankl's logotherapy insists that even emotional wounds, when confronted honestly, can become a source of purpose and growth. Yet the catch is that this confrontation can only take place when the shadow is acknowledged, not denied. The shadow, with its painful contents, is the gateway to profound meaning precisely because it exposes the limits of your control and the depths of your vulnerability. How does all this hidden turmoil manifest in your daily life? It seeps into your thoughts like a silent subtext. It triggers knee-jerk reactions that you can't explain, fractures your capacity for intimacy, and anchors you in patterns of avoidance or self-sabotage. The shadow speaks in symbols, dream imagery, compulsions, emotional outbursts, and in the ways you find yourself drawn to or repelled by certain people or situations. Yet because mainstream society teaches you to favor the positive, to seek happiness as an endpoint, and to move on quickly from pain, you often find yourself mutilating your own story. You become a fragmented self, perpetually running from the parts that matter most. This cultural imperative to fix rather than feel is a profound betrayal of the healing process. It's a collective neurosis that mirrors your personal denial. The modern self is conditioned to see wounds as defects to be eliminated, not as signposts urging you toward integration. The irony is that this very denial breeds a deeper sickness. The wound festers beneath a veneer of normalcy, eroding your sense of authenticity, connection, and peace. You might succeed in anesthetizing your pain temporarily, but the cost is a subtle death of your psychic vitality. There is, in fact, a paradox at the heart of healing here, a truth so unsettling it shakes the foundation of your self-concept. Healing emotional wounds does not mean getting rid of them. It means making friends with them. It means descending into that haunted forest of your soul where the shadows dwell and inviting the darkness to dance with your light. Nietzsche, Jung, Schopenhauer, Sartre, and Frankl converge on this point, not as an abstract idea, but as an urgent existential imperative. But this invitation comes with a price. To embrace the shadow is to face the possibility of losing your old self, the identity you have clung to as a shield. It is to confront the abyss not as an enemy to be vanquished, but as a realm you must enter willingly. You are asked to relinquish illusions of control, certainty, and self-coherence. The healing offered is not a return to innocence or a patching of wounds to appear whole again. It is a death and rebirth, a radical transformation that may leave you unrecognizable to yourself and others. Why then does the world resist this process with such ferocity? Because the shadow holds power. It is the source of both destruction and creation. It is chaos that threatens order, but also the wellspring from which true individuation, Jung's term for authentic selfhood, emerges. Societal norms, religion, and even many psychologies have preferred to marginalize or pathologize this darkness, promoting comfortable narratives of healing that soothe but never transform. This half-truth perpetuates the cycle of wounding, because the shadow, unacknowledged, grows in strength, silently undermining every attempt at wholeness. Look closely. This hidden force shapes the very way you experience emotions and identity. It colors your fears with irrational intensity, inflates your desires with secret compulsions, and governs your behavior with unseen puppeteering strings. Until you bring it to light, you remain an actor in your own drama without a script, reacting to shadows on a cave wall, mistaking illusion for reality. And yet, as terrifying as this shadow is, it also holds the key to an unparalleled freedom. Because only by passing through the darkness can you access the light that is not mere absence of pain, but a profound integration of all parts of yourself, the known and unknown, the sacred and profane, the light and the shadow. It is a journey that humbles and shatters, yes, but it also elevates. The darkest truth about healing is that it demands nothing less than the total transformation of your being. This is not a journey for the faint of heart. The consequences of ignoring this call are profound. A fragmented self, chronic despair masked by false bravado, relationships haunted by unspoken tensions, and a life lived at the mercy of hidden wounds. But the promise, for those courageous enough to face this darkness, is a rebirth into a deeper, more authentic existence, a life no longer dictated by the ghosts of your past, but illuminated by the hard-earned light of conscious shadow. Before you move forward, reflect on this. If you continue to heal without acknowledging your shadow, are you truly healing, or merely rearranging the fragments of a self still haunted by its own abyss? What illusions must you dismantle to face this truth? And are you willing to pay the price of the old self's symbolic death to embrace the fullness of what it means to be human? The tension between denial and confrontation, between comfort and truth, is the battleground on which your healing rests. It waits for no one. The abyss has already begun its gaze, and the shadows within stir like restless phantoms, ready to speak or scream for recognition. The next step is yours to choose. You walk through your day carrying a weight you cannot name, a shadow tethered so tightly to your soul it feels indistinguishable from yourself. Yet this weight is not made of stones or chains, but something far slippier, an invisible architecture of denial and half-truths, a labyrinth constructed by your mind, culture, and biology. Imagine now that this burden is not merely personal but woven into the fabric of the collective consciousness, silently scripting the narrative of societies, families, and entire civilizations. What if the deepest wounds you harbor are mirrored by the collective wounds humanity refuses to face? This is no metaphor. This is the cruel irony Jung uncovered. The same shadow that festers within you shapes the hidden dynamics of the world around you. It's not just your personal pain that remains unhealed, but a shadow dance choreographed by centuries of collective repression, cognitive blind spots, and cultural mythologies that insist on pretending the wound does not exist. It is easier to stitch over the visible tear than to plunge your hands into the raw, bleeding flesh beneath. To do otherwise is to invite chaos. Neurologically, this denial is hardwired. Your brain is a survival machine designed to minimize pain and maintain consistency in your worldview. Cognitive biases, these insidious mental shortcuts, keep you tethered to illusions that buffer you from the dizzying vertigo of reckoning with your shadow. Confirmation bias ensures you see only what reaffirms your fractured self-narratives. The negativity bias pulls your attention toward threats but is paradoxically selective in avoidance, allowing certain dangers, those within your own psyche, to lurk unseen. Your amygdala, vigilant yet blind, triggers fight, flight, or freeze responses. But when the trauma is internal, ambiguous, and fragmented, it cannot mount a clear defense. Instead, your whole being slips into a state of chronic, low-grade siege, draining vitality without your conscious awareness. But this neurological self-protection is a double-edged sword. It preserves you momentarily while fracturing you over time. You build emotional walls as if erecting a fortress, but inside, the undiscovered residues of your shadow leak like poison, seeping into perceptions, decisions, relationships. These toxic leaks distort reality. You begin to inhabit a world sculpted by an unspoken wound, a world where distrust thrives on unacknowledged grief, where love is both sought and sabotaged, where your true self is a hostage. And it does not stop at the individual level. When billions carry this same silent burden, culture, politics, and economies become stained with the invisible blood of collective shadow. Cultural conditioning instructs you to bury the inconvenient truths under archetypal myths of perfection, control, and progress. Society extols virtues like resilience and success, but these often mask deeper absences: disconnected communities, systemic inequalities, cycles of violence, symptoms of a global psyche refusing to claim its fractures. The media bombards you with narratives that shape collective fear and desire, but beneath these lies a more primal truth. The collective unconscious, as Jung described it, pulses with the unacknowledged shadow contents of thousands of generations. This repository contains the unhealed rage, shame, and despair of humanity's past, all projected outward, disguised again as external threats, enemy images, scapegoats. Nations wage wars fueled not just by politics but by ancestral wounds projected onto the other. Families fracture along invisible fault lines of unspoken pain. Friendships dissolve under the weight of unresolved betrayals, encoded in shadow memories. What does this mean for you? How do these forces, vast and intangible, intersect with your own hidden wounds to shape your lived experience? It means that every shadow you refuse to own becomes a ripple in the collective sea, a fissure in the shared reality. You become complicit in a grand illusion, participating in the very suppression you secretly recoil from. The abyss stares back not only from inside you, but from every corner of society, a spectral echo demanding recognition. Do you feel it yet? That unsettling sensation that beneath the surface of your carefully curated life, something uninvited stirs, that your struggles are not isolated but threaded into a greater pattern. This is no coincidence. It is the shadow's silent symphony, a music played on strings of pain and denial, beckoning you to awaken. Culturally, you have been trained to fear your own darkness, to believe that emotional wounds are signs of weakness or failure rather than seeds of transformation. You learned to patch, distract, and medicated your suffering, creating a society addicted to superficial fixes. Yet, these attempts resemble placing a bandage over a festering wound, only inviting infection to spread. The tragedy is that this avoidance has become normalized, so much so that entire generations grow up learning not to trust their own inner turbulence, to mute the voices of discomfort that might lead to deeper truths. Neuroscience adds another layer of complexity. The brain's plasticity is both a curse and a salvation. Neural pathways, once formed around trauma and denial, reinforce habitual patterns of thought and behavior, making the shadow feel permanent and invincible. Yet, under certain conditions, these patterns can be rewired, but this requires a level of conscious courage that most shy away from, precisely because it means confronting the terrifying unknown within. It is easier to drown in the familiar darkness than to swim toward uncertain light. This creates a silent trap, where the mind becomes a prison of cognitive distortions and emotional blindness. You see the world through a veil of shadows, both rejecting and attracted to the pain you do not understand. You yearn for healing but recoil from the very process that would deliver it, caught in a paradox as old as human suffering itself. Consider how this trap shapes the very air we breathe. The unspoken tensions in your family dinners, the political polarization raging in your community, the silent despair behind social media facades. The shadow you deny inhabits all of these, pulling strings from behind the curtains of consciousness, an invisible puppeteer weaving your personal pain into the collective narrative of disconnection and fear. This burden is colossal, but its most insidious power is its invisibility. You can sense it, feel it gnawing at the edges of your life, but naming it feels like staring into a void with no return. Yet the alternative is worse. Living a life fragmented, a mosaic shattered into pieces that never quite fit, haunted by ghosts whose names you cannot speak. How long will you allow this silent architect to design your reality? How many more moments will you spend navigating a world shaped by unacknowledged wounds? The urgency is not a distant echo. It is the pounding heartbeat beneath your ribs, the restless whisper in your mind, a summons to wakefulness that grows louder with every denial. But what if this shadow, terrifying and relentless, holds not only destruction but also the key to your liberation? What if the unseen trap is also the doorway, concealed by fear, but accessible only to those who dare to move beyond illusion? In the stillness of this moment, before revelation unfolds, you stand at the precipice of a profound awakening. The abyss watches, the shadows quiver, and your soul waits for the choice to surrender, to confront, to become whole. The path promises no easy solace. It promises transformation, and that demand is absolute. Yet the alternative, the long night of unconsciousness, looms even darker. Are you prepared to unshackle yourself from this silent prison, or will you remain its captive, lost in a world shaped by shadows you refuse to know? Imagine then that everything you believed about healing, every comforting narrative about closure, forgiveness, forgetting, moving on, was not just incomplete but fundamentally mistaken. What if the very idea of healing as erasure, as fixing a broken self by wishful forgetting or relentless pursuit of happiness, is the cruelest illusion of all? You have long sought to banish the darkness, to excise the wound, to silence the pain. But what if Carl Jung's darkest truth reveals that healing demands the opposite? Not forgetting, not separation, but an audacious embrace of what you fear most, the raw, twisted, shadowed parts of your psyche that you fought to conceal or destroy. This is no quaint consolation. It is a radical revolt against everything you once held true. The wound is not a problem to eliminate but a portal, an ancient, crucible fire that, paradoxically, must be walked into rather than away from. You are not broken to be fixed. You are fractured, yes, but only so that you might be remade more whole than you ever imagined. The idea that healing requires the denial of your darkness is a cultural myth, a soft lie to keep you comfortable while you remain shackled. True healing demands surrender to the void within, a willingness to sit with your pain and let it tell its story without flinching. This perspective flips the script entirely. Instead of distancing yourself from the pain, you must confront it as a living part of your identity. Instead of fleeing the shadows, you must invite them to dance with you. This is the core of what Jung called individuation, the terrifying yet liberating journey toward becoming your authentic self, a self that includes light and darkness, joy and despair, strength and vulnerability. Healing is not a straight line toward happiness. It is the weaving of your fractured fragments into a tapestry so complex, so real, that no lie can unravel it. To grasp the magnitude of this shift, consider some of history's most profound examples. Frida Kahlo, for instance, birthed beauty from unbearable physical and emotional pain, painting her wounds in colors so vivid they still bleed into our consciousness. She did not disguise her suffering, but made it the very medium of her truth and transformation. Or think of the alchemical metaphor Jung revered, lead turned to gold, not by denying its leaden nature, but by subjecting it to fire, dissolution, and recombination. This ancient symbol reminds you that pain is raw material, essential and non-negotiable if you seek the gold of authentic healing. What about Viktor Frankl, who endured the unimaginable horrors of the Holocaust and emerged not broken, but with a message so powerful it reshaped psychology? Frankl's breakthrough was rooted in meaning, finding purpose in suffering rather than escaping it. His radical shift was not to seek comfort, but to build a fortress of meaning in the heart of despair. His story beckons you to reclaim agency not by evading your wounds, but by transforming them into your guiding light. This reclamation of control begins with a courageous mindset shift, the relinquishment of victimhood's illusion. You are no longer the passive prisoner of your past. You possess, buried beneath layers of fear and numbness, an extraordinary power, the power to choose your response to every scar and shadow. Jung's darkest truth is that the shadow you dread is the very source of your creative vitality if invited to the council of your consciousness. To ignore it is submission. To own it is liberation. How then do you begin this revolution within yourself? It starts with radical honesty, looking your wound in the eye without flinching, allowing the pain to speak its hidden language. You must become a witness to your own suffering, not a prosecutor or a defendant, but a compassionate observer who refuses to turn away. In that witnessing, the wound loses its unconscious grip. It becomes a known entity, a carved monument to your history, and paradoxically, a wellspring of strength. From this vantage, you build a new architecture of thought. You cultivate a dialogue with your shadow, learning its codes and recognizing its strategies. The fractured pieces you once saw as liabilities become essential allies in crafting a new self, one resilient and whole precisely because it includes all aspects of your being. You stop seeking external validation for healing. Instead, you become the architect of your own restoration, grounded in internal coherence rather than societal approval. The transformation is not painless. It demands you dismantle long-held illusions, confront shame that feels like acid in your veins, and navigate the abyss where no comforting guarantees exist. But here lies the horizon of true freedom. You begin to understand that the wounds you carry are not curses but crucibles. Harsh, yes, but alchemizing you into a being who can bear more, see deeper, and love with a fierceness born of survival. You are not just recovering from pain. You are transcending it by integrating it, allowing what once fragmented you to become the foundation of a profound inner unity. This is the most subversive, electrifying truth Jung offers. Healing is not about escaping your emotional wounds, but about making them the engine of your rebirth. In reclaiming this power, you join a lineage of souls who refuse to be defeated by their darkness. They understood that to heal is to navigate the deepest shadows not with denial or avoidance, but with fierce, sacred confrontation. This is the revolution of the psyche, the alchemy of the self, where pain becomes the forge, and you emerge not hollowed but whole, not erased but fully illuminated from within. So ask yourself, are you ready to wield this power, to rewrite the story of your suffering as a genesis rather than a grave? Are you prepared to face your shadow, inviting it into your life not as an enemy but as a vital force? Because the moment you do, the entire landscape of healing shifts beneath your feet, and you become more than a survivor. You become the sovereign of your own. Transformation. The shadow you have wrestled with, the darkness you have dared to enter, is not an enemy to be conquered or a foe to be banished. It is the wellspring of your truest self. Imagine now, standing at the edge of a vast chasm whose depths you have only just begun to fathom. Beneath you lies everything you feared, every fragment of pain etched into your cells, every hidden scar carved by years of neglect and silence. But in the silence, something else stirs. It is not emptiness. Rather, it is the vast potential of your being, waiting to be claimed. This is no ordinary healing but a transfiguration. The wounded self you once sought to fix, to erase, to hide, was never broken beyond repair. The wounds were not interruptions in your story. They were the secret passages, the underground rivers transforming leaden suffering into liquid gold. Carl Jung's darkest truth waits here, in this crucible of confrontation. Your suffering is your psyche's language, its desperate attempt to awaken you to a deeper reality. To heal, then, is not to silence this language but to become fluent in it, to listen beyond the agony and hear the whispered call of your own wholeness. All this time, you may have believed healing meant turning away from pain, replacing the shadow with light, the sorrow with joy. But what if true healing asks you to dwell in tension, to hold paradox without resolution? What if the wound is the very doorway to freedom, and what you thought was your ruin is, in fact, your salvation? Jung did not offer comforting platitudes or quick fixes. He revealed that the psyche's darkness, that gnawing, unsettling void you fear, is the prerequisite for any authentic emergence. Ask yourself, what if the world you inhabit, the version of yourself you have been told to protect, is a fragile construct, a veneer of safety built on denial? Beneath this facade lies the raw, unedited chaos of your being, the shadow self that refuses to be ignored. This shadow is not merely the repository of your faults and failures. It is the well of untamed vitality and creativity, the primal force that can ignite your evolution. To heal is to descend intentionally into this darkness, not as a victim, but as a seeker, armed with curiosity and courage. This descent is terrifying because it dissolves certainty. You lose the comforting illusion of control. You confront parts of yourself so alien that recognition feels like betrayal. But this is also liberation. In surrendering your illusions, you forge a bond with your true essence, a self that is neither fixed nor fractured, but fluid, alive, and whole precisely, because it embraces its contradictions. Herein lies the paradox. To heal, you must be willing to fall apart so that you may be reborn anew, more deeply rooted in the fertile soil of your inner truth. And so, the final revelation unfolds like a slow-burning flame in the dark. Your emotional wounds are not marks of your inadequacy or evidence that you are unworthy of love and peace. They are the scars of your initiation into being fully human, fully awake, fully present. Each wound, each fracture in your psyche, maps the pathways through which your soul demands to be known. To ignore or deny them is to condemn yourself to eternal fragmentation. To embrace them is to step into the alchemical dance where pain and wholeness entwine. Now hold this truth close. Healing is not a destination. It is not a prize to be won or a state to be achieved. It is a way of being, a radical openness to the totality of your experience, the seamless weaving of shadow and light, despair and hope, destruction and creation. It is a commitment to live in the paradox that your darkest wounds contain your deepest liberation. This is the revolution Jung beckons you towards, the revolution of the psyche, the reclamation of your own sovereignty. Look back at your journey of pain not as a series of misfortunes but as a profound rite of passage. The trauma you endured, the anguish that once seemed insurmountable, are the crucible that forged you. They are the dark soil from which your most vital self will bloom. This is the paradox of the shadow. It is both your prison and your portal, your curse and your blessing. To heal is to learn this language of soul, to become the alchemist of your own life. And so, as you stand on that mysterious edge, between light and shadow, despair and hope, you are invited into a dance as old as human consciousness. It is the dance of integration, where you no longer fight the darkness but make it your ally. You come to understand that wholeness is not perfection but the courageous embrace of imperfection. The psyche's wounds are not flaws to be erased, but profound poems to be heard and honored. Can you hear it now? The call from within, faint yet insistent. It is not the voice of fear that has long held you captive, but the voice of your deepest self, calling you to awaken, to step fully into the wild, beautiful complexity of your own being. This is the path Jung laid out, not as a comfort but as a challenge, not as a balm but as a fire. It is the fire that burns away your illusions, so that the true light of your soul can shine undiminished. If you choose to answer, you will find that the darkness you feared is not a void but a womb. It holds you not in despair, but in the sacred mystery of transformation. You will learn that every wound is a doorway, every shadow a teacher, every fracture a code waiting to be unlocked. The most profound healing is the courageous act of staring into the abyss and discovering that the abyss gazes also into you, recognizing the sovereign power of your soul's emergence. So what will you do with this truth? Will you shrink from it, retreating into the comfortable illusions of avoidance? Or will you step into the fire, unafraid to be consumed and reborn? The choice is yours, and the stakes are nothing less than the shape of your life, the texture of your being, the legacy of your soul. Let the shadows rise. Let the wounds speak. Let the darkness become your home. And in this radical acceptance, find the luminous heart of your healing, wild, unyielding, and utterly whole.